Hello everybody and welcome to my little dried corner, one of my favourite places in the studio. And in this tutorial I wanted to share with you everything I know about dried flowers. Firstly, they're back and I'm so excited to see them back on trend. It was many years ago, in the 90s actually, that I was teaching dried flower classes out of my retail shop and loved them. And they were 6-week courses that were booked out constantly. So a little bit's changed, but I just wanted to go through with you, I guess, all my years of experience of different ways that I dry my dried flowers. I have dried my fresh botanicals where possible always, and I think as you know, a retail florist these days, if you're not trying and experimenting at drying all of your leftover fresh material, you are crazy. There's a great opportunity now for you to be able to turn those into sales, turn those into designs, and really reduce the amount of material that you're sending to the waste. So there's lots of opportunities there for you to be able to recoup your money with your fresh material. So first of all, the biggest question I get asked all the time is, how are your dried so nice and colourful? How do you dry your own flowers? And the tips on making that work for you at home. So firstly, what I want to share with you is the worst enemy of your dried flowers or the drying process is humidity. So for us here, where I live, it's quite dry. In the tropical areas of Australia, I know a lot of the florists struggle with drying their materials, but for us, it's a dry area here, which I'm very thankful for. But what you do need is low light, good airflow, and relatively regular temperature. It's not something that goes, again, too hot and humid or too cold and wet as well. So definitely not in a cupboard. People often think, oh, well, I'll put it in a dark cupboard. That just encourages that sense of humidity, because what happens if you're dry, your flowers aren't completely dry when you start the process. They're still exuding, going through the photosynthesis process, they're still releasing moisture. And so if they're in a closed environment, they start to sweat, which in turn creates bacteria, and that's what turns into mold, unfortunately. So you can see here the way that I dry my flowers is hanging them upside down on my branches. I call them, we can call them a drying rack if you like to, but essentially they're just branches. And I just tie them up and hang them upside down. Now the main reason for hanging upside down, there's nothing really that technical or scientific about it, other than the fact that the heaviest parts of your flowers are the heads of the flowers. So it only makes sense that if you were drying them straight up, the heads wilt and you end up with a bent stem when they're dry and they're brittle. So hanging them upside down is just a way of making sure that your stem stays straight and your flowers stay straight. The other part of this process for me is that the studio, the roof line there is open to the air, and I also have a window behind me. So I just crack that open so that the airflow goes between the stems and makes sure that it stops any of that mold process because of that constant airflow. I would say though, earlier in the year we had a huge amount of rain, which we hadn't had for a long time. And I had the most amazing billy buttons, which is Crispidia, the beautiful little round ball heads, gorgeous. So happy with them. They were amazing and huge. And after about 3 weeks of rain, it was very humid. And of course, then the sun comes out in the middle of summer and up goes the humidity again. And I came down and they were green balls of mold. There was nothing I could do to save them. They went straight into the compost. So unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. But for me, this system seems to work really well. Another thing that I would say also that I do is that I dry my flowers quite slowly. So for my blue gum, For instance, these kangaroo paw, you can see that they're still in a bucket of water. So I just change the water every few days. I don't have any use for these now fresh, so I'm saving them to be dried. And because they're actually going through their life process in water, they're actually drying slower. And what that also does is help them keep their colour longer. In my experience, that's the best way to dry also your blue gum. Any of your foliages tend to dry much better if they're dried slowly. So I will leave those in the water probably for another week or so, and then tie them up, hang them up, and let them dry on the drying rack for another month or so, 3 or 4 weeks, before then I can take them down and pop them into this other area, which just has my taller flowers and stems and branches and things. So that tends to work really well if you can dry them a bit slower in water. Another flower that I use a lot of as a dried flower is this hybrid status. So any of the status, the misty, just the Emile is another one, dries beautifully well. So what I find is that when I see things in the market or with the growers that I know is a great dryer, I tend to buy triple the amount that I actually need, maybe on the day, some for fresh, and then use all of that to dry, because I know it's in season, it's when it's going to be its absolute best, and I know it dries really well then as well. And it's also much more economical for me to know that I've got, cotton in stock, I've got some beautiful straw flowers, these paper daisies are only out for a really short period of time, so I just load up, buy them fresh, and then I know I can hang them up and have them dry all year round. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that don't expect your dried flowers to last forever. They are really a lovely continuation of a fresh element. So for me, I think about my dried flowers as maybe being about a 12-month design, and then I might pull it apart, refresh it with some new drieds, and just move them around. Of course, a 20-year-old dried arrangement, and people have told me they've still got their flowers from me from 15 years ago, and I think, I could hate to have a look at them by then. They'll just be full of dust and pretty gross and disgusting. So think about your dried flowers as a sort of a 12-month to 2-year kind of turnaround, and freshen them up. Especially at the moment, there's some beautiful varieties. Now that leads me to something that has become, sadly, in my eyes, a huge trend at the moment, and that is the importation of the dyed, artificially coloured and chemical ridden product that's en masse in the market at the moment. And a few of my students and clients have been asking, well, how will I know the difference? Because you can see here, there's a lot of colour in some of my dried flowers, and it's all naturally that way. And the way that you can tell is that certain varieties, when you see them in the market, especially hydrangea, for instance, is just a full solid colour. Nothing dries like that in nature. It dries in variations of tone. And it's these garish colours of blue and hot pink and black. And I mean, everyone to their own. But I think nature does the most beautiful job of coloration all by herself. I don't feel any need at all to be changing and altering that in any way. But the big issue that I have with these is the process. One, the process that this material goes through, essentially usually in another country. Just even the human element of that, the poor person that's actually having to stand in front of vats of bleach and chemicals and dyes while this process goes through. And I won't go through the whole process here now, but essentially what happens is the plant is cut, it is then dipped in bleach so that it rids it of any of the chlorophyll that's in the plant at all, which then in turn makes the plant quite brittle and almost fall apart. And then it is coloured and then plasticized so that it doesn't just disintegrate, which is essentially what it's about to do with all of that treatment. And then packaged up huge amount of packaging and then brought over here, flown over to Australia for, people to use here. But essentially, it's not a flower anymore. It's rubbish. It's in no way can it be biodegradable. In no way go back to the earth where it came from. It's basically plastic and rubbish. Seeing that pure white palm and all of those pure white flowers, in a spray above a baby's cot just makes me cringe. The chemicals and the bleach that's impregnated into that, what was once a beautiful natural thing is no longer. And I don't think we'd put anything like that into our children's rooms if we knew that it had been treated with so many, high toxic chemicals. So I think this is a really important conversation. I really want you to be aware of what you're buying. If you see anything that is pure white, other than cotton, the gorgeous bunny tails, this is the natural colour of a bunny tail. They dry this beautiful sandy cream. It's gorgeous. So if they're blue or pink or yellow or purple, they've been dyed and they're now no longer natural. And I just, naturally dried flowers complement each other. I just don't really see the need why we're just saturating them in fake colours. Anyway, so big issue there. More about your safety. Safety of the planet in regards to the process that goes into it, as well as the being able to recycle and compost that material, and the safety of yourselves as well. So please think about that before you rush out and just follow a trend because it's a trend, when there's just so much colour available to you naturally. And the other thing that I guess I wanted to share with you in regards to the designs, that a few little tips. As you know, I will be using lots of dried material in my designs, and making, so beautiful glass cloches and large dried arrangements, and as well as adding dried elements to some of my fresh designs as well. So in future tutorials, you'll see me use lots of different dries. I'll talk about the process of drying during that time as well, and also how you use dries, because they can be really tricky to use, mainly because they're brittle and they don't always have the same type of movement that your fresh flowers have. So that's something to consider. But again, I'll be talking to you later in future videos about that, when we, design with these gorgeous elements. So another example of one of the designs that I'll be teaching to you further down the track with some of our other tutorials is one of these gorgeous little dried head circlets. Absolutely beautiful. What I did want to share with you though, it's got lavender and kangaroo paws and little daisies and obviously the bunny tails, is that I actually used the rice flower in there fresh, because I know that it dries really well. This is the rice flower here. It's in full flower at the moment, grows wild all through the bush here, very easy to grow. But I just wanted to share with you that, even adding some fresh elements to a circlet like that, when you know they're going to dry well, and just experiment. You just never know what's going to, actually dry and keep its colour and look gorgeous. But that's just dried so beautifully. Another flower that I experimented with, which in all my years, I would never have imagined in a million years that it actually would have dried so interesting and amazing and cool, is anthuriums. So traditionally, any flower that has a lot of moisture, so all your tropical flowers, orchids, things like that, don't usually dry very well, mainly because they're actually really full of moisture and full of water. But these anthuriums, they were so beautiful that I left them in the vase way past their beauty period. And I could see that they were just starting to curl and dry. And They have dried the most amazing shape and colour, and I just adore them. So experiment. Just try anything that you've got left over in the shop, left over in your studio after a wedding or an event, and you just never know when you're going to be able to put something really gorgeous together and unusual, even if it's just for yourself, by getting a nice little surprise like those anthuriums. So another thing that I've been experimenting with at the moment is planting straw flowers and larkspur in my garden. I know both of these flowers dry really well. I am absolutely thrilled with the straw flowers. I bought these seeds from Floret Flower online back in autumn, started them from seed, germinated them here in the studio, and then planted them out, and they are amazing. So what you're supposed to do as a grower, if I can call myself a grower, is pinch off the first flower, because that then in turn gives more energy to the rest of the flowers that are on the same stem. So what I find though is those first flowers have the shortest little stem. So I cut those, and then I do a wiring technique called central internal wiring. We wire it, tape it up, and essentially give it a fake stem, but then I can use it in all of my dried designs. So I'm really excited. I'm going to be using every single flower that little patch produces and dry every single one. The other flower that's a little bit unusual that people may not realise dries very well is larkspur. Again, when this is in season, you can buy it relatively less expensive than some of your other longer cottage type flowers. And so when it's in the market, again, I buy as much as I could, and I used to dry all of it. So I'm growing it, and it actually grows, that's larkspur dried white, which is like snowy white. Again, like, why would you buy bleached flowers when you can have beautiful white larkspurs like that? So mine in the garden are much taller, cannot wait. I'm really trying hard not to pick them and putting them in the house fresh because I want them to, start to mature on the stem so they'll dry better. So really looking forward to drying those as well. Okay, so to finish today, I just wanted to go over just the basic variety of techniques of how to dry your flowers. One is a silica bed. So you know those little satchels of silica that you might find in a packet of when you buy your shoes, or you buy something random and there's a little packet. That's a silica packet, and it's there to remove the moisture out of that box. So you can actually buy silica, put it in a Tupperware container, and things like roses, probably the anthuriums too, actually, something that has a little bit more moisture in it rather than the wildflowers, dries very well in silica. You lay it in that silica bed and it dries relatively quickly. Does tend to keep the colour in roses better, and usually takes a couple of weeks before it's completely dry. So that's the silica method. This is called air drying, which makes perfect sense. Then of course you have pressing. So you can buy a flower press and press the most amazing, daisies. Actually, flannel flowers just press beautifully. They don't dry so great air drying, but they're gorgeous pressed. So pressing is another way, and it's a bit old school, but I'm really glad to see that there's starting to be, some new flower presses are coming out, which is a really beautiful keepsake to be able to add to some of your designs. All right. So I hope that's given you a bit of an overview of drying flowers, answering the questions that I get asked the most. But if you've got any more, and I'm sure you do, please pop them in the comments box below this video and I'll be sure to get back to you. And remember, I will be doing many more dried flower focused designs, and I'll be sharing all of my techniques and design tips with you in future videos. See you later, everybody. Hope you have a great day.